Hello, all, and welcome back to a new episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we are actually throwing it back to 2007, and we are reviewing Sunshine. We haven't done a sci-fi movie in a while, so I think this will be fun to do. All right, Sarah, kick us off with an IMDb summary for Sunshine.
A team of international astronauts is sent on a dangerous mission to reignite the dying sun with a nuclear fission bomb in 2057.
All right, now that's quite a premise.
Right?
What is your one-sentence summary for Sunshine?
My summary is, it turns out that walking on sunshine doesn't actually feel good.
Nice. Well played. I like that one. That's good. My one-sentence summary is Baby Oppenheimer goes to space.
I kept thinking about that, and my other thought of a summary was Cillian Murphy likes big bombs and he cannot lie. That's what I kept thinking while watching this movie.
Wait, I love that so much. In my headcanon, that is your one-sentence summary at this point.
Perfect.
Wow, I didn't know that I needed that in my life, but I'm so tickled by that. I'm just tickled that you came up with that. That's amazing.
That was like, as soon as I learned that he was the physicist in that was the first thing that popped into my head. It's like, why am I the way that I am? But that's okay. Let's keep watching this movie.
Oh, it's too good. It's too good. Wow. Yes, I needed that today. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, we're excited to talk about this movie. This was actually on your watch list, it sounds like, for quite some time. We watched another summer release that came out this year. We'll let you guess which one it was. And we needed something else in our life in this time of society. So we decided to watch something fun, something spritzy, change up the lineup. It's summertime. We need sunshine, I suppose. So, yeah, Sarah, do you remember where you heard about this movie slash what was intriguing about it to you that it's been on your list for so long? I'm actually curious to know.
I think I initially heard about it because I have a friend who really likes Chris Evans, and she was just like going through some of his like old filmography and watched this and was like, oh my gosh, it's so good. You need to watch it. And then I heard other like movie people talking about it over the years, and I've been like, yeah, that's that movie that I need to watch. And so we had a hole in our calendar, and Sunshine is currently streaming on Hulu. And so the stars
Here
aligned.
we are. Yeah. We carpe diem'd and we're not doing it.
We did.
Yeah. I'm surprised. I hadn't heard about this movie. I'm surprised I haven't because there's so many stars in this that are huge.
Yeah.
This film is like just so star-studded that I'm shocked this is like not more part of the discourse, or at least it's not part of the discourse that I am a part of. So glad to have watched this movie, and I think it does some interesting things, which will be fun for us to talk about. So, Sarah, what are your high-level thoughts about Sunshine? We won't spoil the movie quite yet.
Yeah, I really had a great time with this. I had so much fun hanging out with these characters. It's fun to see the the influences of movies like Alien on this and all of that, but this film also does things that are interesting and different too. And I was also surprised at how good this looks and sounds. This is one of those movies that I'm watching at home, and I was like, man, I would have loved to have seen this in theaters. Like, can we get this re-released in theaters?
Yeah.
Because it looks and sounds great on my TV at home, but this would be such a cool experience in the movie theater. So I'm really jealous of everybody who saw this in 2007 when it came out. But yeah, I had a great time with this. The end, there were some pieces of it in the last like 10 minutes that kind of lost me a little bit, but on the whole, had a great time with this movie. Would highly recommend watching it. It's really fascinating and does some fun things within the confines of, a crew trapped in a spaceship. It's it's interesting what it does kind of within those boundaries. So, what about you?
Hmm.
What did you think of Sunshine?
Yeah, I really liked this movie. I had a really good time. I like that it does something very different than what I was expecting it to do, as far as the characters and what pushes the plot forward and some of the big set pieces, if we even want to call it a set piece. I feel like I expected this to be a lot more spectacle. And I think this film in general is far more cerebral. And that was really fun to see. I almost wish that it leaned even more heavily into that throughout the film in some of the scenarios that we found our characters in. And the third act, I think, just takes a weird left turn that I didn't really like. So I wish that I got a different ending and third act of this movie. But I love the first two acts so much that I'm like, yeah, it's fine. uh, in a lot of ways, this film feels like a morality play more than anything. And I love that stuff. So I almost wanted more of that and for the characters to have been put in other types of scenarios or had more time to like navigate some of those tough choices that presumably need to be made when you're just a team out floating in outer space in the galaxies having to make some really hard decisions. So the other thing that I'll say is that I love how much all of the characters can be trusted in this film for the most part. Everybody on this team is thinking incredibly strategically and logically and reasoning through scenarios while still having a lot of emotion as well. And I think that was like a neat thing to see, is that we had a kind of ensemble cast of characters that all had a good head on their shoulders. And I feel like usually you see like the two in the group and everybody else goes off the deep end. And in a lot of ways, this feels like a process movie for these people figuring things out. So I was thinking a little bit about women talking while watching this movie and how very different context, but that same concept of seeing human beings come together to discuss hard things and try and make the best decision together, and how interesting that is and how dramatic that can be was really cool to see in outer space. So those are my thoughts about Sunshine at a high level.
Yeah, it's so thrilling to watch them just have conversations, which I'm always impressed when a filmmaker is able to do that. They're able to set up the stakes enough and then have the conversations be dynamic enough to be tense and stressful and pressure filled. And you feel the weight of every single decision that they're making together.
Yeah.
And this film absolutely nails those pieces.
Yeah. Yeah. Which makes me mourn for what the third act could have been a little bit more, which I'm sure we will talk about. So, Sunshine. It's came out in 2007. So we're about to dive in. We're going to talk about this movie. Spoiler alert for you here. We're going in. We're diving in. All right. So maybe let's start with what are some of the things that you found really interesting that this film chooses to do that's very different from a lot of other sci-fi movies in the landscape? Like what stands out to you in that dimension?
I think one of the things that I really loved about this film is how it plays with contrasts all throughout. And
Mm,
so obviously you have, the light and the dark, and we have points throughout the movie where they are engulfed in light, and then in points in the movie where they're engulfed in darkness.
mm.
And then you have like the color contrast too of the really red sun and like the blue tint cold outer space
Oh.
and all of that. And then even because they have this like garden that's creating oxygen, you have this like very like tactile organic space amidst this very
Mm,
industrial advanced technology ship. And the way that this film is constantly pairing those things together, and even tonally this film is constantly shifting between like a tense moment and a peaceful moment, and they come back to back to back to back, like, and
mm,
that constant shifting was really interesting to me, and also didn't feel like whiplash to me, which I found
mm.
extra surprising, because I usually feel, especially with like tonal shifts like that you feel like you're just being like whipped back and forth, and then you feel kind of disoriented. But for me, those cuts, they're so quick that I think they're really effectively paint a picture of what it's like for these people on this spaceship. And because everything they're dealing with is these like really really stark contrasts, I think it shows just how harsh of an environment that they're in, that they've chosen to be in. So I think all of those things paired together are really interesting in setting the scene and also introducing us to these characters and this journey that they're on.
Mm. Yeah, you bring up a great point around it not feeling maybe muddy too. Sometimes the mixing of tones can feel like there wasn't clarity in direction, there wasn't clarity in atmosphere and ambience that they were looking to create. But somehow it does work in this film, and maybe it's because of the abundance of those contrasts that help almost articulate a theorem of this universe that we exist in this movie, which is that it is whiplash being in space. You go from, I like the example you gave of that really organic garden room. I felt like I could breathe a little bit when we're with Michelle Yeoh just tending to the plants. I'm like, oh my gosh, something that's not like industrial and sterile. It's like this like respite, this little oasis in the midst of what feels probably like a complete isolation and disconnect from the other. So yeah, I wonder if the amount of contrast actually works to this film's advantage instead of feeling like there wasn't clarity and direction, if it was just a few places where there was that contrast that was existing.
Yeah, and I think it also plays into, like the volatility of the characters too. If you were stuck on this spaceship with all of these people for this long in this isolated space, you'd probably be going through all sorts of crazy emotions all the time, basically. So I
Yeah,
think it's also, especially in the beginning, I feel like we get these little snippets of like a tense moment, and then they're like in the garden or they're in the earth room or whatever, and it's just
yeah,
like this like constant back and forth, or one character is in a tense moment and another one is in a peaceful moment, and you see how, I guess, combustible it would be to have all of these very different personalities all in very different mental spaces, all together, working together, figuring out how to live together. I think that that also helps show us who these characters are without needing to do any like exposition or anything like that. Like we live in their world and feel that tension or feel that peace for a moment, and we can infer a lot about who they are.
yeah. Particularly in the way that we're thrown into this film, the world of this film. I just love that there isn't the exposition of like we meet one character at a time while they're doing whatever thing that they do for the team. We kind of just join one of their first team meetings, and based on what they're saying to each other, the stances that they take, we kind of get a sense for who everybody is. So I love that we skip the like, this is Michelle Yeoh, she's the gardener and she does this and this is the vibe of her. This is, and we just go right into seeing how they show up when they're in a group together. And that's often quite telling of like the role that everybody's playing and why in this first team meeting opening scene that we get in this movie.
And I love that, you have to have the team meeting, and it's very reminiscent of Alien. And this film uses it so well, though. You do get to know who they are, and you also learn um, that things aren't going exactly according to plan already. They learn that they're flying into the dead zone days earlier than they thought. So if they want to get a message to their loved ones, they have to do it now. And I love that, it's a low stakes thing, obviously not to these characters, but in the grand scheme of the movie, that's a low stakes moment of tension, but it's introduced right away, and you get to see how important that phone call is and how everybody kind of responds to that as well. So it's this like fun get to know everybody, but also introducing, hey, there's this thing, it's going to cause some tension, let's see what our characters do.
Yeah, and adds to the danger of the situation that they're in. I think that that was so effective so quickly early on of feeling like, man, they're putting a lot on the line. There's real costs to them all being here. I think sometimes like we meet our characters in space and it's like so fun. They're on this big grand mission and adventure. And that's not the vibe of this movie at all. Like there's nothing sexy and fun and exciting and thrilling about their space adventure. It's kind of honestly terrifying and hellish and really terrible for them, and we feel how much they are putting on the line by even being here and being on this mission. And so that was fascinating right off the bat with this film tonally, is like there's nothing heroic that is felt for these characters in them doing this. It really is a sacrificial act that they're making to save humanity, and kind of the weight of that I felt from the beginning, which colors so much of the rest of the film, especially when they're having to make all of these really tough decisions, uh, morally, moment to moment, scene to scene. So that was cool too, to see the way that this film is taking a very clear stance on what kind of space movie we're going to be.
Yeah, this is not a fun, let's go to space, guys, or even a like triumphant, let's save the world movie. It's okay, this is kind of our last shot, and there's a high likelihood that we won't survive, but let's go. Let's see if we
Mm-hmm.
can do something, anything. And the film stays true to that because everybody dies. And honestly, that
That's
feels
kind of fitting.
pretty accurate for this type of mission. Like, it's really sweet that you thought that you could maybe get home, but like, nope.
I love that nobody gets home.
Yeah.
Yeah, not even one. Like I think there's so many other movies where like one of the side characters or the main protagonist like uh crawls into an escape pod in the final moments and then gets blasted off, and even if we don't know if they survive or make it back to earth, like there's still a possibility that they've found some sort of survival. And this film just like, yo, everybody gets blown up or like gets frostbite or burned alive. It's every death is quite gruesome. Honestly, this film is very dark in that way. Actually, it's um, true to the tone it sets at the beginning. I guess we'll say. Uh, One of the things that I really loved about this film, and I wanted more, but I'm satisfied with what I got, but would have loved to just relish in a little bit more, is how many tough ethical decisions they're constantly having to make together. And I loved the scenes where we're just sitting with this crew in their common area having to debate like ethics and morality together. I thought that was so dramatic and so interesting, and they all make such sound logical arguments on both sides too. And I appreciate that we get the full spectrum of, sometimes they have the blessing of time to be able to like talk through these decisions, and then sometimes they're in the airlock and someone's got to just die and stay back to open the airlock so that they can get propelled into the back to this main ship, and they all just have to kind of agree and like make that choice together collectively. And I love that we get the full spectrum of that. And we also get many moments like that back to back, kind of more quickly than we expect. I think in another version of this film, there's like the big tee up for it, the big discussion, the big decision, and then we move on to the next thing. And there's kind of a big tee up again. And I kind of love that this feels like, honestly, every day, right after lunch, before dinner, you've made like 17 really gray ethical decisions that you constantly have to be thinking about and discussing together. I loved that aspect of this because I think it makes really great use of this team stuck in space, and then also really revealing a lot about like when human beings are in these kind of really dire situations, how do they make choices like this that are really hard? And that was really fun for me to chew on and get to watch. And I think what was cool is I just trusted every character, that they're really thinking through these um, with as much objectivity and uh, intentionality to make the best choice, And I think that was really cool too, to see them all kind of try their best to make a really good decision that they felt proud of. And so getting to see a lot of characters do that together was really cool to see. I loved that aspect of this movie.
And I loved how each of those conversations kind of subverted our expectations. The first big one that they have with the whole group before people start dying, and it comes down to like them all looking to the captain to make this decision. And
Yeah.
instead of him being like, "Yes, I am the captain. I need to make the decision for my ship," he's like, "No, I gotta ask the physicist," because he knows like, hey, can we do it with what we have, or do we need to have this backup? And so that was an interesting subversion that obviously reveals a lot about this captain and kind of his own like humility and understanding the boundaries of his role too, and understanding the value of the team. And then I loved when they were on the other ship, just the dudes, and the now captain, the formerly second in command,
Yeah.
comes in and he's like, "No, I am the one in charge now. I'm the one who needs the suit. I need to be saved." Blah 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 blah. And the others are like, "Nah, dude, your role is not vital." And I love that most of the pushback to Harvey comes from Mace, who is this like very brash, very opinionated dude. But he has such clarity, and he's like, "No, this is what we're doing. This is right. Think logically." And I love that Mace isn't this like hot shot too. Like he's not hot
Yeah.
headed, kind of like Harvey is. But in those tense moments when he has to make a decision, you can tell that he's already thought through all of the logic and has come to what he believes is the best decision, kind of without that like ego and sense of self-preservation. And I loved that pushback to Harvey coming from Mace, because I wouldn't have expected it from him as a character. And so it's just those little things throughout this film where, you think a character is going to respond one way and they do something completely different than what we normally see in a movie like this.
Yeah, and also breaks those expectations of what we think from these characters that are can commonly be archetypes. So the Chris Evans character is a great example of like the really loud, really assertive personality type in a group that tends to also be in films, in TV shows, the one that is hot-headed, the one that has the ego and the pride. And so it's cool to see him kind of really use that personality trait to like make that stance very clear with Harvey, but for a decision that we as a viewers is like that, yes, that's sound. That's really good. And it's not about him. It's genuinely, we can feel like he's thought about it for the best of the mission. Going back to that first scenario that you talked about with the captain choosing to allow Kappa to be the one to make the decision as the physicist, I love too that he kind of does his calculations in that opening set piece scene, and he's like, it's a toss up, it's 50-50, and there actually isn't evidence and logic and backing for the choice, but he has to just use his gut, use his intuition, and trust that was the right choice. And I kind of loved that too from the very beginning, because it's easy for us to think that so many of these decisions will eventually have the evidence and the backing and the very sound judgment for making the right choice. But a lot of times in life, we kind of don't know. And I think Gillian Murphy's character even says, like, it's literally a toss up. Like, it's heads or tails. And he's like, all right, so what do we do? Um, Heads, I guess. Okay, we're going to get Icarus one, and I love that also he has to take like deal with the responsibility that other characters later on in the film put on him for that choice, and kind of absorbing the costs of what really was kind of his best guess choice, and dealing with all of like the guilt and I'm sure the like moral implications of that choice, I think is also really interesting. So even though the captain doesn't make the choice and puts it on the physicist, honestly, it kind of is a sucky position for Kappa to be in, to have to be the one to make that choice and bear the responsibilities of all of the costs and implications and side effects of that choice. So I loved that too, is that the calculations come up with a 50-50 choice. And that was kind of a subversion of my expectations too. I thought there would be clarity of like, yes, going to get Icarus One was the right decision. And we, to this day, still have no idea if that was right or not. But we just take the path forward and
Yeah.
deal with the next step along the way.
Well, and I also love, after you finish the movie, you know that what they did worked, presumably.
Yeah.
And so it's also this like, it was a 50-50 shot, and there was a potential for them to be able to go along with the original plan, be successful, and everybody get back home. And I
Yeah.
think that that makes this film even more tragic, which I think is really, really smart to do because nobody survives. And it's like he made the best decision with the information that he had. And the mission was successful, but there's a way, if they had just stuck with the original plan, they could have potentially enjoyed that success instead of having to sacrifice for that success.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Yeah, it's like almost the alternate path might have been better based on the information that we have now of how the other path turned out, but also who knows what next planet they would have like passed by and picked up on, or that first payload, the only payload that they would have had didn't work and they actually would have needed a second payload in order to make that work. Yeah, who knows? Who knows? Instead, they go to Icarus 1 and pick up this like zombie, like fallen angel character that was really weird. And I hated that whole bit,
All right, go
honestly.
ahead. Pop off, talk about the third act and everything you hate. Please, I'm excited to hear.
I hated it. It was terrible. I'm like, this movie was so deeply like rooted and grounded, and all these characters are making choices. It was such a fun process movie. We got to see them talk about the machinery and the gadgets and the things they need to do to make this happen. And then all of a sudden it becomes like a superhero, like fantastical movie where we get like this um fantastical villain that shows up who's been like waxing poetic about like these like almost like mythological concepts around like talking to God and taking humanity to heaven. And I just thought that was really strange. It feels like tonally such a left turn that we take. I think like so much of the third act leans into just spectacle. I have no idea what any of the characters like are trying to do at any given moment, which is so different from the rest of the movie where I really had an understanding of like, oh, they're going to pull this material off of the airlock that they're in because of this specific rule of the world that has been told to me. That's really fun to like enjoy those details and see them go through the processes based on the constraints that they have. And I feel like the third act just completely blows all of that up. I'm like, okay, well, like there's this cooling agent and like homeboy is getting like frostbite and his leg is stuck. Like I just don't know what any character is doing at a given moment. So it just felt like a lot of visuals, a lot of like larger than life, hazy silhouettes of our fallen angel character. I don't understand how he survived all of these years. I don't understand how we got onto the ship. Like it just feels like we hand waved so much and then veered into a different movie and we became a cartoon. So I think all of that was really strange. And man, so much of the first two acts was so strong. So I mourn what a cool third act in the same vein of this movie with even more morally ambiguous decisions could have been to successfully complete the mission and still end on our tragic ending. But give me the process stuff. I don't want this weird like dude with a raspy deep voice saying all this like philosophical stuff as he like, silhouettes with like fire behind him. It was weird. I feel like the minute he shows up on the ship, we're in a different movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely did feel like that. I think the reason why that it does feel very tonally different, and I was thrown by it, but the piece that I was interested in is it's it's not this, but it was almost murder mystery esque, and so
Yeah.
I appreciate that because I love murder mysteries. So I was like, okay, you know what? Now we're just hunting like a ghost murderer, basically. Like that's cool. All right, I'm down for some ghost murder hunting. That's great. It's weird, but
So
all right,
weird.
let's go. It was the last like 10-ish minutes
Oh
that
yeah.
really lost me because I didn't understand where we were in space. I didn't
Yeah.
understand
No idea.
who was where in relationship to one another. I didn't really understand. I got the general gist of we're flying into the sun and we're going to explode the bomb in the sun. Like I got that. But the specifics of where Killian Murphy's character was, I was like, I don't understand this. So I think if those had been a little bit clearer and I had better understood visually what was going on, I think I would have been more okay with it. You know, the stuff with Pinbacker, like it's weird. It is a left turn, but I mostly didn't mind it because I was like, oh, this is weird. We got some like horror movie stuff in here now. This is
Yeah.
kind of cool. But I'm also down for your morality play. Like if we had just stretched the first two acts into the third act, maybe have a little more time to breathe between some of those parts, or maybe Trey doesn't die so early and you have a little bit more wrestling in there, like that could have also been interesting. But I didn't mind where we ended up except for those last 10 minutes.
Where we couldn't see anything. I'm like, I can't see.
I just
Where are you? I'm like squinting at
right.
my screen, being like, all right, I see like a bunch of stacked stuff. So, okay, we're in the payload room. But then, like,
Yeah,
Chris Evans' character is in some cooling agent liquid.
yeah, that
And
was the
I don't
coolant to
know.
keep everything cool, to
Yes.
keep the
But then,
computer cool. That I was fine with. I was like, I understand this. I know what we're doing with him. It was all after he's dead. Everything after
oh,
that, where it's just basically Killian Murphy just running around doing stuff, and then we like press some buttons, and then things eject, and then he's suddenly in like the payload room, and I'm like, wait, how did you get in here? I don't understand. Like, just I didn't understand where we were, and so I was confused, even though I knew that we were flying into the sun.
it almost feels like they've like ran out of money, you know? Like they
Mm,
spent all the money on the other really cool visuals of like the
yeah.
shield turning, like all
Oh,
of that I thought was
so
really
cool.
artistic, which I didn't expect, but really like beautifully framed and almost like voyeuristic in the way that we're just like watching this like large machinery move for many minutes of this movie. But the end, it's like they ran out of money. There's lots of like hazy, blurry stuff that was supposed to be like symbolic of something, and fires burning because they're in this hellish inferno with the devil, like I can't see. I just want to see what is happening. Yeah, it was funky. But at that point, I'm like, I don't know, anything goes at this point. We got like a man that's been alive for 7 years in space somehow.
Yeah, man, it's chill. He's Mark Strong. It's fine. He
Mhm.
can do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. I did think that the reveal and the way that they um, unmasked the fact that there was a fifth crew member was so cool. Was really fun. I almost wish that we don't discover and find Pinpacker that quickly and had more time to just like hear footsteps or see shadows and have it really feel like basically the first act of a horror movie, but in the third act of this movie. I think that would have been really fun. And maybe Pinbacker shows up and kills him in a big stab at the ending, right as he's pushing whatever button he needs to save humanity. But kind of a little more of a cat and mouse chase would have been really fun because the concept of being on board with limited oxygen and needing to complete your mission and not being able to find who the heck this fifth team member being is, that's really eerie and really terrifying. And I think that could have been really fun to like play into the tension of all of that more and also add this big hurdle to needing just to like preserve oxygen to complete this mission to save humanity. I think they could have like spent more time in that state of unknown, and just to have that looming presence of Who? Why is there another being uh, on board? That's really fun. The reveal and the way like
Mhm.
Icarus, the kind of like AI and the machine, the computer reveals that to Kappa is also really was a great scene. I thought that was just like sent chills up my spine. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it
well
was
done.
so cool. And like so surprising too of like, wait, what? Like, you're in
Yeah.
space. How did you pick up a random person while you're in space?
Hmm.
So I think that that was fascinating. I also would have loved more time just wondering who is it? Where is this person? Who's stealing our oxygen? Like, I think that would have been really interesting. I was shocked while watching how quickly he's revealed. I was like, wait, what? No,
Yep.
we needed more time in that tension because that tension is so interesting. I think that's more interesting than seeing him, you know? So you could have characters stumbling upon, Michelle Yeoh dead in her burned up sad garden. That would have been interesting. They're like, whoa, there is somebody here. We need to go find them. I think there could have been a little bit more with that, maybe that could have been more interesting and less time of the waxing poetically, like you talked about.
Yes, less of that, please. I mean, honestly, the third act would have just become the first half of Alien, where like people are dying, there's a creature on board. Oh no, like our team is dropping like flies. Like that would have been really fun too to get to see. Uh yeah, really neat. Really neat.
Yeah. Which is kind of what happens, but just with a weird kind of half ghost, half person, and not as mysterious as it could have been. But I did find it interesting the kind of like symmetry in how people die. We have like the captain and the therapist, they both like exposure to the sun, that's what takes them out. Then you have
Yeah.
Corey and Trey, who are both taken out with like a blade, and then
Um,
Mace and Harvey both die from exposure to cold, they freeze to death.
mm,
And I found that really interesting, that not everybody dies the same way, which I mean, you're in outer space. How many creative ways are there to kill a person in space? And
yeah.
somehow this movie found these different ways to create these deaths and using different elements too, which I
Mm.
found really interesting. So again, if we're thinking about this movie as a movie of contrasts, we have a lot of those even in the deaths as well.
It's really great when the way you die, you have a little buddy with you, like a little pal
You
who also
know,
died that way too, when you meet in
yeah.
the
It's
afterlife
nice
and
to
you're like,
have a
oh,
friend.
yeah, you burned alive too, same.
Hey, cool.
It's just like when you're at like an icebreaker at your like corporate job and they're like, you're getting two cards, find the other Queen of Hearts too and have some
Mm-hmm.
small talk, like find the other dude that also died by freezing to death.
Freezing to
Go hang
death in
out.
space.
Yeah.
Go
Little
be
friend for you.
friends.
Oh, it's so funny. It's so funny. Uh yeah, I had a point that's totally leaving my brain that I was gonna make, but then I forgot now. That's really cool. Love that for us. It'll come back to
Hopefully it'll
me.
come
Maybe
back.
it won't. That's fine too.
That's okay.
uh it was about the scene you were just talking about earlier. What was it? You know what? I'm just gonna let it leave, never to flutter back again.
Maybe it'll flutter
we're
back.
doing
I don't
we're
know.
doing great. We're
And
doing
if
great,
it
y'all.
flutters back at like 2 a.m., just text me and I will also enjoy your thought.
It was a fun one. Okay, it's fine. Dang it. That's fine. Uh okay. Other big things that we wanted to talk about with this film that were really notable.
I loved how this looked. I this came out in 2007, so it's almost 20 years old, which is really gross to think about.
Yeah.
Um, and it looks fantastic. Like, I'm amazed at the details and how they were able to create this that looks this good this many years later. You know, you think especially about like the early 2000s and how people were playing with CGI, and it doesn't always look great today. And you can just see how much detail and intentionality and time and money went into making some of these shots. And like you were talking about with the shield, making them look so artistic and so beautiful, and doing some things that I feel like are interesting, because even the ship design, I mean, we've seen 1,000 space movies, and I feel like
Mhm.
this spaceship looks different than what we've
Mm.
seen before. The way that they use the shield is different than what we've seen in space movies before. So I loved the creativity and the artistry that went into that. That's still paying off all these years later.
Mm. Yeah, this movie does look absolutely incredible. And there's some really great cinematography moments too with our characters as they're, from the side angle staring out through their window, trying to make decisions or direct this spaceship in the direction that they need to be. One thing that I thought was really interesting is how much time the film chooses to spend in those shots of showcasing the shield changing angle or direction or turning the ship. It felt really indulgent, and I felt terrified watching those scenes, and it felt like the ship itself almost had a life of its own in this weird way. Uh Hearing the like groaning and the moving of machinery felt like this ship had it was like sentient in some weird way. And I think especially seeing how many times in this film something goes wrong in what the humans are intending with their spaceship and their machinery and all of that, and almost fearing every time we were spending so many minutes watching it move. I'm like, what's gonna go wrong? Like, what piece is gonna fall out? What thing is gonna malfunction that's gonna cause a whole nother set of chaos? So the ship itself almost felt like a being or animal like in some weird way, and was going to, you know, uh, like malfunction or like act out against our crew in some weird way. So I felt that was a interesting feeling that I think usually when you watch spacecraft moving in space in a space movie, it's just like kind of establishing shots or just kind of helping you frame context for like, here's where our crew is inside. And this one felt like there was a lot more meaning and intention behind the way those shots were constructed.
I think another thing with the ship that kind of surprised me is the computer, and the way
Oh
that
yeah.
Icarus responds to the crew. You know, I mean, we've watched so many movies about, the AI going crazy and the AI taking over
Oh
the ship
yeah.
and killing all the humans and all of that. And yep, that's a whole thing. And so I kind of expected a little bit of that in this film as well, and it's not there. And
Yeah.
you see the way that the ship gives over control to the humans and will then take it back when it needs to. And it's like, hey, you are actually going to kill everyone and mess up the mission. So I have to take control back again. And when the humans ask for control back, they get control back again. And so it was just interesting to see this portrayal of this really advanced computing system that doesn't have that ego and
Mhm.
that, sense of control. It's just like, nope, I am here, this is my mission, I have been programmed to do my mission, I will do my mission. And it was just nice to see the computer not going crazy, because we had enough else to deal with without the computer losing its mind and killing everyone.
Oh yes, we've seen that a million times. We love that whole, plot line in movies. Just the AI fears, the technology fears are so real, honestly, now more than ever as well. But yeah, Icarus was so obedient and so helpful too, honestly. Every time character needed something, it's ready to give the information and so polite and so pleasant about it as well. So that was fascinating to see. Yeah. An alternate ending that I wanted to submit is when our zombie ghost shows up. I thought it would be really cool if somehow this was kind of a hallucination for Kappa in some way because he is our primary protagonist. But I thought that could be a really interesting storyline or way to frame this or kind of leave it a little bit vague because we obviously know that these characters have been isolated for so long. They're under immense pressure. And getting to see a character that almost like we can no longer trust as an unreliable narrator as they descend into madness and kind of succumb to the insanity of their situation, I think would have been like really fascinating and really interesting too. And then similarly, submission as part of this potential plotline, getting to see the way that Cassie as a character can play a role to kind of like debunk or burst that bubble a little bit in the final moments when Kappa's kind of just spiraling and kind of the redemptive arc, even if they both die, but at least like we need people to actually do great together. And doing it alone and having that lone ranger, lone hero is not the path forward. I think it would have been like really interesting with like them descending into insanity, and almost imagining what could be. And I think it would make some of those like waxing poetic bits really fascinating in light of how much time they have to spend thinking about these really morally gray situations that could put your head in kind of a really like big loomy headspace around like what is the value of our life and our existence, you know, like and that leading him to potentially this like a really philosophical uh morality bit, I think would have been really cool. So that I think would have been fun is to see that this fallen angel was kind of a figment of actually their imaginations a little bit.
Honestly, I was wondering at first if that's kind of like the route that they were gonna
Yeah.
go, because you see, especially when they're examining Icarus 1, you see like the flashes of people's faces throughout, and then before we see Pinbacker, you also see a flash of him as well. And so I was like, "Oh, are we going to go like a hallucination route?" I don't know
Yes.
what the symptoms are for oxygen deprivation, but if that is one of them, that would be really interesting to explore. And then, like you were saying, the compounded with being isolated and kind of going stir crazy while
Yeah.
you also don't have enough oxygen to fuel your brain. That could be really interesting to explore.
And seeing the way that maybe some of the characters in our team that are having to discuss these hard decisions maybe become more extreme in their thinking
Mm,
or more twisted in their thinking too, I think would have been really cool to see.
yeah.
And then how they have interpersonal conflict and relational conflict and some of the choices they want to make, I think, and how they work through those or don't, would have been really fun too, because we get that moment with Mace and Kappa, and they kind of just like punch each other for a little bit. And that explosion of pent up frustration, energy, blame that can come from being in such an extreme situation, I think is like so human and was really cool to see. So we get these little outbursts in this film, but I would love to see maybe a little bit more of that as the mission becomes more dire and time is running out, and the way that some of the characters kind of go off the deep end a little bit and have to be reeled in or have to be managed in some way, I think would have been really cool as they try to do their best on this mission yet again. So I think that would have been a fun alternate version of this movie. And I think all of the ingredients and tee up and honestly like stance that this movie's taking in the first two acts seems to be in line with what could be a cool take on this story.
No, I love that. I think that that sounds really fun. I also love that little fight scene. I really appreciated too because it shows, cuz we had the fight scene earlier where they had to be like pulled apart from each other. And in this one, they basically pull each other apart because they don't have enough oxygen. So I loved seeing those really obvious moments where the oxygen deprivation is getting to them. And so I think there could be a little bit more opportunity, because obviously we know we need oxygen to survive, obviously, but it would have been cool to see a little more of how that lack of oxygen is actually starting to affect them, even if they're like mostly okay right now. How is that affecting their performance? How is that affecting their body? And like to your point, the decisions that they're making, because they don't have enough oxygen to properly function. I think that would have been really interesting to see, especially because we just spent an hour plus with them as they're making really sound, logical decisions, to see how oxygen deprivation might mess with some of those when you need them to be making really good decisions because they're about to fly into the sun. Like, you kind of need them to be pretty sound at that point in time.
Yeah, yeah. And how, as the situation becomes more and more dire, some of the like uglier sides of us can come out. Like, I think it was Mace taking Trey's blood and literally putting it on Kappa's hands and being like, this is your responsibility because you made that choice that we saw him make back at the beginning. That was a total toss up because you chose to divert our path and go get Icarus one. That was your choice. Now this is now your responsibility. And almost him, honestly, it's more of an admission of his own probably guilt around maybe choosing and being willing to kill Trey too, because he was the one that was advocating the hardest for that and was even willing to do the act, and almost his now kind of delayed guilt in that choice, having just discovered that Trey took his own life. I think like all of that is really interesting to see the way that it's coming out in these ways that are external and putting the blame on somebody else, when in reality, what it really probably is signaling is, man, he feels guilty that he would even think to make such a choice that is really hard and ugly, but felt so necessary at the time, kind of the aftermath of sitting with that. He kind of takes out on Kappa. So I thought that was like a really fascinating little sequence. I also just love that the women in this film are so level headed and subverting a lot of the expectations that we often see of like female roles, especially in this time period in the 2000s, the 90s. And Michelle Yeoh's character, after the little like brawl, she's like, assholes, we need to limit our exertions. She's like, bring it back to like, bro, we've got limited oxygen. What are you guys doing? You know, it's like so matter of fact, unfazed, and just like walk. They both, her and Cassie, both just walk away. I got a kick out of that. That was really satisfying to watch. Not gonna lie.
Oh, it was so great. Those two characters were just phenomenal. We don't get a
Yeah,
lot of time with the women in this movie, but the moments that we do, it's like, oh yeah, these are some just badass female
badass chicks.
protagonists. They were just fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So good. So good. Okay, last things we wanted to mention about Sunshine before we wrap.
Yeah, one thing that I also really appreciated about this film is that there's no romance storyline in
Oh
this.
yeah, that's true.
I really expected that there would be a scene between Kappa and Cassie, and I'm really glad that
Yeah.
there wasn't, because if we think about it logically, you're stuck with all these people on this ship for years. That's going to be really awkward if there's some like romantic business going on over here. We don't want, everybody to be whatever, third wheeling it up. Like, no, that's gross.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that the film completely avoids that. There's nothing there. I was like, yes, okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
what we need. It just felt so, it felt more realistic. And also, the film is so focused on the mission that it doesn't have time to get lost in these other little side tangents. There's more than enough here with just them trying to survive and accomplish
Yep.
their mission. We didn't need a detour, and I'm glad they didn't take one.
It's so true. And I love that they don't even, one, they don't fully like consummate that whole storyline, but I love that they don't even like tiptoe down that path either. You know, I think like another movie might not have them actually fully get together, but there's just a slightly longer smile, a slightly like lingering glance that seems to suggest it, just to like satiate that part of us that like wants to see that as a viewer. And I love that they don't even do that. They're just kind of like, I need to help you. I need you to survive so we can do this thing for humanity, you know? Like we've got more important things to think about. So I love that the film also doesn't even like tiptoe around it or like throw us some seeds to like think about and let our minds wander. It doesn't even, it's not interested in doing that at all either. So that was cool to see. Yeah. One other thing that I thought was really neat, and this is specifically around Trey's storyline, is the scene where he discovers that the trajectory calculations were incorrect and that he forgot and missed something. I thought that that scene was really cool because it reminded me a lot of what Oppenheimer does a lot as well, which is just how much stakes are often on those that are having to do a lot of the like execution and the almost like insane cognitive pressure of doing what you do best, but knowing that one calculation off, 1 degree off, and the amount of pressure on that precision is wild and insurmountable to have to figure out how to like work under those circumstances. And it was neat to just see the way that like we often see so many like crews out in space, but to not actually think about how much pressure every character's role has to do what they do with the amount of like literal zero room for error and the weight that that must carry. So once again, this film really debunks anything like cool, sexy, heroic, thrilling about a space adventure. And I thought that was a really like almost grounding moment of realism in I don't want to be a team member on this crew because the amount of pressure you constantly feel for every little thing you do would be wild to have to endure and what that does for your mind. So I thought that was really neat. It almost like takes away the gleam that we often see and the shine of a space adventure and kind of showcases this like really gritty realism in being a scientist or being a member of this team with a very specific role that you need to do with just an insane amount of precision. Oppenheimer does something very similar, you know, like one calculation off and you potentially blow up the entire globe. Like, okay, casual, go do your job now. And I thought that was a really neat scene. It happened so early and also feels like one of those grounding moments of this movie of this shit is no joke, you know? And we are going to make sure you know what kind of movie we're going to be. So that was a neat scene to me.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it definitely makes it clear. Like, this is the movie that we're doing. And my question in that scene was, why was he doing this by himself? You know,
Yeah.
I feel like
Mm,
because that comes off of, the team discussing, and we see the team dynamic, and they're all wrestling with this together. And then it's not long after that we learn that
yeah.
Trey didn't uh, take into account the shield, didn't rotate the shield, and
Yeah.
it's another crew member. That's his first questions that he asks. Like, he's so aware, he's so like he understands this was the step that needed to be made before Trey even says anything. And so
Mm,
I was just like, why didn't you ask someone else? Like the you these are this is your whole community, this is your whole team here. Why
yeah.
didn't you ask anyone else before you went in and you made this decision yourself, you changed course by yourself? And so I think that's also really interesting to think about. Everybody on the team is there for a reason, and everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and they're at their best when they're all working together.
Yeah.
And we see when Trey goes off and tries to do this by himself for whatever reason, that's when things start to go very, very, very wrong. And so I think that's also an interesting thought about, teamwork and how we can work together, and the importance of like relying on your team, especially in high pressure situations like that.
Those team dynamics and why there wasn't more of those checks and balances in place to ensure the quality bars are met or that the accuracy was there. Another interesting team moment that I found really fascinating, kind of subverted my expectations too, was when the team, there's only I think like 4 of them left or maybe 3 of them left, and they're deciding whether or not they need to take Trey out in order to preserve the amount of oxygen they have in order to make it and complete their mission. And that whole bit where they're like, how do we weigh the life of one against the future of mankind? And they have this conversation under the circumstances and the requirements of needing a unanimous decision. And Cassie says she's not going to give them her vote, but then they decide to do it anyway. And I thought that was really fascinating that the other three then collectively chose to completely wipe out a very real circumstance that they've all agreed on, that they make decisions unanimously, but then they're like, oh, but actually now we're just going to do it anyway. And just the way that can sow mistrust or break the like almost this like the system of organization of this small tiny little microcosm of a society that they have in this like little spacecraft, to go against what they all agreed to at the beginning. So I think that was really interesting, because I thought they would have to duke it out and fight it and argue and try and convince Cassie, but they kind of are just like, I know we said this was unanimous, but too bad. We're going to go do it anyway, like right now. And so that was neat. That was fascinating to see the ways that the rules of this world that they've agreed to can shift at any moment. And that's very unstable. That's very unnerving, I think, because then it's basically anarchy. Like we don't have to stick to anything that we said that we were going to do. And that was a moment that I thought was like, oh, this is different.
Yeah, Cassie's reaction in that was so interesting to me because she's like, no. But then the next thing she says is, make it easy for him, find a kindness. So she doesn't say yes, but she also like gives her blessing for them to do this.
Yeah.
And so I found that really interesting. And I'm like, why? What? Because you basically said yes without saying the word yes. So what does that like do for you as a person? Like, is this you like abstaining from the vote? Like, that was an interesting thing thinking about her as a character of like, what is
Yeah.
this doing for you? What is this revealing about your own internal sense of morality that
Yes.
you can't, affirm this decision, but you can like remove yourself almost
Yes.
and just encourage them to do it kindly. Like that's interesting.
Yeah.
Just to think about her like as a person and what that, I mean, because she basically said yes without saying yes. So what does that reveal about who she is and how she's processing through this decision?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. And did the other characters kind of know that like she thinks yes but also can't swallow the guilt of it, so that we're going to say this is a unanimous decision and then basically go back on that, and just do it anyway, but at least she can delude herself into thinking that she was not part of the decision and that's what she needed? Like, do they just know her well enough to know that that's what she needed? I'm sure maybe, because you've been stuck on here together for so long, to kind of just like play the roles that they need to, but then it's kind of hand wavy of like, oh, this is a unanimous decision. She says no, okay, we're gonna do it anyway, and just let her believe for herself that she wasn't responsible. She gets no blood on her hands. If I'm her, I'm like, wait, we said this is unanimous. Like, why? And now I have no voice. Like, now I really believe strongly that we can't murder this man. I need to fight for this. Oh, but she doesn't do that, like we mentioned. So yeah, even her reaction is surprising. There's a fun series of turns that happen within that scene, literally within seconds of each other. That makes that scene really fun. Would have loved to see, yeah, just more instances of that, because it's really juicy. All right. Well, we clearly had a great time with this film. A lot of stars that are really fun to see in kind of like early roles too, just like baby versions of themselves. They all give great performances. So a lot to chew on, a lot to think about with Sunshine. You can find it available, as we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, to stream on Hulu. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Movies and Us. Our name sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about Sunshine. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at moviesnestpod, or email us at moviesnestpod@gmail.com. Check out our website, andusmedia.co, for the latest on Movies Nest and our other podcast, TV and Us. We'll be back next week with another throwback. We're throwing it back to 2003, and this one's a fun one. Y'all, we are going to be talking about Pirates of the Caribbean. We've got some fun guests for that one. It's going to be a great time, so join us next week. In the meantime, we hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again with y'all very soon.